Have you ever wondered why you feel that paralyzing fear when you're about to make a life-changing decision? Why, even though you know something no longer works, you cling to it as if your life depended on it? You're not alone. That fear of change you feel, it's not a coincidence. It's your unconscious speaking to you in a language you may not yet have learned to decipher. Think about it for a moment. How many times have you stayed in a relationship that no longer nourished you, in a job that dimmed your spirit, or followed a path you never really chose? Carl Jung, one of the most profound thinkers of modern psychology, offers us a fascinating explanation of why we resist change so much, even when we know it's exactly what we need. Jung discovered that our fear of change isn't simply a superficial reaction. It's a response deeply rooted in our collective unconscious, that part of our psyche that we share with all of humanity, and that holds ancestral memories, archetypes, and patterns that have survived through generations. It's as if you carry within you not only your own fears, but also those of your ancestors. Have you noticed how your body reacts to imminent change? Your heart races, your palms sweat, your breathing becomes shallow. It's not just anxiety, it's a primitive survival response. Your body is preparing to face the unknown, as humans have done for millennia. Jung understood that this mechanism, though useful in remote times, can now become a prison that keeps us trapped in lives that no longer resonate with our true essence. But here's the fascinating part. According to Jung, that same unconscious that generates resistance to change also contains all the tools you need to transform your life. It's as if within you, there exists an internal compass, a deep wisdom that, once you learn to listen to it, can guide you toward your true self. Jung spoke of the individuation process, that personal journey in which you shed the layers of social conditioning to discover who you really are. It's not an easy path. It takes courage to face your shadows, those parts of yourself that you've repressed or ignored, because they don't fit with the image you have of yourself or with what society expects of you. Think about your current life. Are you living according to your own values and desires, or are you following a script written by others? Jung said that most of us spend the first half of our lives trying to be what others expect us to be, and if we're lucky, we spend the second half discovering who we really are. The problem is that this discovery implies change, and change awakens primordial fears within us. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of the unknown. But Jung reminds us that these fears are nothing more than guardians of the threshold. They're there not to stop you, but to make sure you're truly committed to your transformation. When you face a significant change in your life, you're not simply changing external circumstances. You're challenging your identity, that mental construct you've created over the years that gives you a sense of security. Your ego, that conscious part of you that Jung described as barely the tip of the iceberg of your psyche, resists with all its might because it perceives change as a threat to its existence. Imagine this. You've built your life like a fortress with high, thick walls to protect yourself. You've invested years in fortifying it, in making it comfortable and familiar. Change presents itself as an earthquake that threatens to tear down those walls. Of course it's frightening, but what your ego doesn't understand is that those walls don't just protect you, they also imprison you. Jung discovered that our unconscious sends us signals constantly, trying to guide us toward a more authentic life. Dreams, intuitions, synchronicities, they're like whispers from your soul saying, there's more for you. There's a fuller life waiting for you on the other side of fear. But we often ignore these signals because they don't fit with our rational view of the world. Have you ever had a recurring dream that seemed to be trying to tell you something important? Or experienced meaningful coincidences that seemed too perfect to be chance? Jung called this synchronicity, seemingly casual events that are connected by meaning rather than causality. They're like signs on your path, indicating that you're heading in the right direction or that you need to change course. But these messages tend to be subtle, and our modern society is designed to keep us distracted, disconnected from our inner world. Jung lived in a very different era, But even then, he warned about the dangers of alienation for modern humans who live on the surface of their existence, ignoring the depths of their psyche. Today, with our bright screens and constant notifications, that disconnection is even deeper. We're so busy responding to external demands that we barely have time to listen to what our soul needs. And when we finally do, when we feel that internal call to change, fear appears as a fierce guardian. Jung understood that this fear is not something we should suppress or ignore. On the contrary, it's a valuable part of the process. It's a sign that you're about to cross an important threshold. As Jung said, there is no birth of consciousness without pain. Change always implies a symbolic death of the old to make way for the new. Think about nature. A caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly without passing through the darkness of the cocoon. A seed doesn't transform into a tree without breaking its shell and going through the earth. Every transformation process involves a period of chaos, of destruction, before a new order emerges. Your unconscious knows this. In fact, Jung believed that your unconscious contains not only your personal history, but also the accumulated wisdom of all humanity. It's as if you had access to a vast repository of ancestral knowledge, if only you knew how to connect with it. The paradox is that while your ego fears change, your deep self yearns for it. Jung understood this perfectly when he said, "The personality, like life, must be formed. It must grow like a tree, not be built like a house." We are not static beings, we are processes in constant evolution. Resisting change is resisting our own nature. But how do we reconcile these opposing forces within us? How do we honor both our desire for security and our longing for growth? Jung proposed an integrative approach. Instead of seeing these tensions as problems to solve, he saw them as polarities to balance. It's not about choosing between stability and change, but about finding a way to incorporate both into our lives. Jung introduced the concept of the shadow, those parts of ourselves that we repress or deny, because they don't fit with our ideal self-image. They can be impulses, desires, or capabilities that we consider unacceptable or dangerous. But Jung warned that the more we reject our shadow, the more power it has over us. It's like trying to keep a ball underwater. Eventually, it will surface with force. Your resistance to change is often related to your fear of encountering your shadow. Because real change requires you to face those parts of yourself that you've been avoiding. It's not just an external transformation, it's a journey into the depths of your being, where both your darkest fears and your brightest potentials reside. Imagine that you've lived your whole life as a pleasing person, always putting the needs of others above your own. You've repressed your anger, your desires, your boundaries. You've become what Jung would call a persona, a social mask that you wear to be accepted. The problem is that, over time, that mask adheres so much to you that you forget who you are beneath it. And then, one day, you feel that inner impulse for change. Maybe it's a recurring dream, an illness that forces you to stop, or simply a void that you can no longer ignore. Your unconscious is trying to communicate with you, to show you that there are parts of you that have been waiting to be recognized and expressed. But changing would mean confronting your shadow, that repressed anger, those denied desires, that inner voice that has been silenced for so long. Of course it's frightening. It's not just fear of the unknown. It's fear of yourself, of those parts of you that you don't know or have rejected. Jung taught us that the only way to free ourselves from that fear is by facing it. Not avoiding it, not denying it, but looking it directly in the eyes. As he said himself, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Real change requires us to integrate our shadow, to recognize and embrace all parts of ourselves, even those that make us uncomfortable. This process is not easy. In fact, Jung compared it to a descent into hell, a journey to the underworld of our psyche. But he also claimed that it is precisely in that darkness where we find the most valuable treasures of our being. Like gold that is purified in fire, our true essence emerges through the trials and tribulations of change. Have you noticed how people who have gone through profound transformations often talk about it as the best thing that's happened to them, even though it was painful at the time? It's not that they enjoy suffering, it's that they've discovered that truth that Jung knew well, that our deepest wounds contain the seeds of our greatest strength. Jung invites us to see the fear of change not as an obstacle, but as a portal. Every time you face a fear, every time you dare to cross a threshold despite the resistance, you are participating in your own individuation process, that heroic journey toward your true self. Think of the great heroes of myths and legends, those universal archetypes that Jung studied so deeply. They all face trials, descend into darkness, confront their demons, and emerge transformed. It's not a coincidence that these stories resonate across time and cultures. They are external reflections of an internal process that we are all called to experience. But unlike mythical heroes who often embark on their journey driven by an external call, your change begins with an internal call. That whisper from your soul telling you that there's more for you, that there's a more authentic life waiting if you have the courage to follow your truth. Jung discovered that when we ignore that call, when we resist the change that our deep self yearns for, we pay a price. That price can manifest as physical symptoms, depression, anxiety, or what he called neurosis, an internal conflict between different parts of our psyche. Have you noticed how you feel when you're living in contradiction with your inner truth? That feeling of heaviness, of being disconnected, that something fundamental is missing in your life. It's not just unhappiness, it's your entire being screaming for authenticity, for the freedom to be who you really are. Jung taught us that the only way to heal that internal division is through what he called the process of integration. It's not about eliminating parts of yourself, but about recognizing them and finding a way to incorporate them into a more complete and coherent whole. It's like conducting an orchestra where each instrument has its place, even those that might sound dissonant when alone. The change we fear most is often precisely the one we need most. It's as if our unconscious, in its infinite wisdom, guides us precisely toward those experiences that will help us heal and grow, even though our ego resists with all its might. Think about the synchronicities you've experienced in your life. Those moments when it seemed that the universe was conspiring to take you in a specific direction. Jung saw these meaningful coincidences as manifestations of what he called the unus mundus, the underlying unitary reality that connects all aspects of existence. When you're aligned with your deep self, when you listen to and follow the guidance of your unconscious, these synchronicities become more frequent. It's as if the outer world begins to reflect your inner world, creating a bridge between the visible and the invisible, between the conscious and the unconscious. But to experience this fluidity, this dance between your being and the universe, you must first be willing to let go of control. And therein lies another aspect of our fear of change, the fear of losing control, of surrendering to something greater than ourselves. Jung understood that this fear also has deep roots. Since humanity began to develop ego consciousness, there has been a tension between our desire for control and the reality that we are part of a much vaster whole. Our ego wants to believe it's in charge, that it can control every aspect of our life, but the truth is that we are immersed in forces much greater than ourselves. Change reminds us of this uncomfortable truth. It shows us that, despite our best efforts to plan and control, life has its own flow, its own intelligence. And sometimes, the best we can do is surrender to that flow, trust in that intelligence that transcends us, but also includes us. Jung described this process as surrendering to the self, that psychic totality that includes both the conscious and the unconscious. It's not a passive or resigned surrender, but an act of deep trust in the inherent wisdom of your being. It's recognizing that there's a part of you that knows, even when your conscious mind is confused or scared. But how can we cultivate this trust amid the uncertainty of change? Jung offered us some keys. One of them is to pay attention to our dreams, those nocturnal communications from our unconscious that often contain guidance and wisdom that our conscious mind cannot access on its own. Have you ever had a dream that seemed to contain an important message for you? Jung saw dreams not as random manifestations of our sleeping mind, but as meaningful communications from our unconscious. They're like letters from our soul, written in the symbolic language of images and emotions. Another key that Jung offered us is the practice of what he called active imagination, a conscious dialogue with the figures and symbols of our unconscious. Through this dialogue, we can establish a more fluid relationship between our consciousness and our unconscious, creating a bridge that allows us to access the deep wisdom that lies within us. And perhaps the most important key Jung gave us is the acceptance of paradox, the ability to hold opposing tensions without trying to resolve them prematurely. Change always involves paradoxes: destruction and creation, death and rebirth, fear and courage. Instead of trying to eliminate one of the poles, Jung invites us to find a way to integrate them, to allow them to coexist within us. This capacity to hold the tension of opposites is what Jung called the transcendent function, that capacity of our psyche to create something new from the tension between seemingly irreconcilable forces. It is in that space of creative tension where true transformation arises. Think about the moments in your life when you've experienced profound change. Isn't it true that they often involve tension, a period of not knowing, of being suspended between the old and the new? Jung shows us that this liminal space, this no man's land between what we were and what we are becoming, is not a place to avoid, but a fertile field where the new germinates. But our ego, with its need for security and certainty, fears that space. It prefers to cling to the known, even if the known makes us unhappy. As Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Your fear of change is not a whim, it's a deeply rooted pattern that will continue to direct your life until you recognize it and work with it consciously. Have you noticed how certain patterns repeat in your life? Maybe you keep choosing partners who abandon you, or jobs that devalue you, or friendships that drain you. Jung called this the compulsion to repeat, that unconscious tendency to recreate situations that reflect our unhealed wounds, our unresolved conflicts. Real change involves breaking these patterns, and that requires consciousness. It requires you to look honestly at your life, to recognize your patterns, and to take responsibility for transforming them. It's not easy. In fact, it can be deeply uncomfortable. But as Jung said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. This pain is not a punishment. It's the pain of growth, of expansion, of breaking the limits of what you thought possible for yourself. It's the pain of the caterpillar transforming into a butterfly, of the seed breaking its shell to become a tree. It's the necessary pain of transformation. And here's the fascinating thing: once you accept this pain, once you surrender to the process of change with full awareness, something surprising happens. The fear begins to diminish. It doesn't completely disappear, but it no longer paralyzes you. It becomes a companion on your journey, an indicator that you're moving your boundaries, that you're growing. Jung taught us that our goal is not to eliminate fear, but to develop a different relationship with it. Instead of letting it direct our life, we can learn to listen to it, to honor it, but not to blindly obey it. We can recognize its wisdom, the way it alerts us to possible dangers, without allowing it to keep us trapped in a life too small for our spirit. The change your soul yearns for is not capricious. It's a call to a fuller, more authentic life, more aligned with your true nature. Jung believed that each of us has a unique destiny, an individual path that only we can walk. He called this individuation, that process of separating yourself from collective expectations to find and express your uniqueness. But individuation is not an egocentric journey, it's a path of service. By discovering and expressing your true self, you not only free yourself, but also offer the world your unique gift. As Jung said, individuation has two aspects. First, it is an internal and subjective process of integration. And second, it is an equally indispensable objective process of relationship with others. In other words, when you dare to change, When you dare to be who you really are, you inspire others to do the same. Your authenticity becomes permission for others to be authentic as well. And in a world that constantly pushes us toward conformity, toward denial of our deepest truths, this is perhaps the most powerful gift you can offer. Think about the people you've most admired in your life. Aren't they those who live from their authenticity, who have had the courage to follow their own path despite external pressures? These people aren't special because they were born different. They're special because they had the courage to embrace their difference, to take the risk of change instead of settling for a mediocre life. Jung reminds us that we all have that potential within us. We all carry inside us a unique treasure waiting to be discovered and shared. But to access that treasure, we must be willing to embark on the journey, to face our fears, to embrace change as an ally in our growth process. This journey is not linear. It will have moments of advance and retreat, periods of clarity and confusion, peaks of inspiration and valleys of doubt. Jung compared it to a spiral, where we revisit the same themes over and over, but each time from a deeper level of understanding and awareness. And most importantly, it's not a journey you have to make alone. Jung discovered that we are all connected through what he called the collective unconscious, that vast repository of wisdom, symbols, and archetypes that we share as a species. When you immerse yourself in your process of change and transformation, you are touching not only your personal history, but also a much broader current of human experience. It's as if you were following an ancient map, one that has guided countless souls before you. The challenges you face, the fears you must overcome, the thresholds you must cross. They all form part of what Joseph Campbell, inspired by Jung, called the hero's journey, that archetypal structure that underlies the myths and legends of all cultures. And here's a comforting truth. If so many before you have walked this path and emerged transformed, you can too. Your fear of change, though real and valid, doesn't have to have the last word. You can recognize it, honor it, and even learn from it, but not allow it to stop you. Jung once said, "What you most need to find is what you fear to find more than anything else, yourself." Because deep down, what we fear most is not failure or rejection, but our own power, our own light. As Marianne Williamson said, in a quote that resonates deeply with Jung's teachings, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. Change invites you to reclaim that power, to take responsibility for your life and your growth. It's not power over others, but power with and for others. It's the power to live from your center, from your truth, from that deep connection with your essential being that Jung called the self. When you live from that place, the fear of change begins to transform. It's no longer an obstacle to avoid, but an indicator that you're on the right path. As Jung said, "Where fear is, there is power." Your deepest fears point precisely to where you need to go for your greatest growth and transformation. Imagine your life if you could embrace change instead of resisting it. If you could see each challenge, each crisis, each moment of uncertainty, not as a problem to solve, but as an invitation to expand, to awaken to a greater consciousness, a greater fullness of being. This doesn't mean that change will always be easy or comfortable. Jung never promised an obstacle-free path. In fact, he understood that difficulties and challenges are an integral part of the growth process. As he said, the basin where the metal is tempered must be as useful to it as the flame. But it does mean that you can find a deeper meaning in those challenges. You can see your life not as a series of random events or problems to solve, but as a meaningful journey of discovery and expression of your essential self. Jung believed that each of us has a unique purpose, a specific contribution to make to the whole. He called this the task of life, that inner calling that, when we follow it, leads us to a sense of meaning and fulfillment. It's not something that someone else can define for you. It's something you must discover through your own process of inner exploration. And here's the paradox. This discovery requires change, requires that you be willing to let go of what no longer serves you, to venture into the unknown, to face your deepest fears. But the change you fear most is precisely the portal to the life you most yearn for. Your unconscious knows this. That deep part of you that Jung explored with such dedication is constantly trying to guide you toward your fullness, toward your most authentic expression. Dreams, synchronicities, those intuitions that appear in the most unexpected moments. They're like beacons on your path, illuminating the way to your true self. But to follow that guidance, you must be willing to let go of control, to trust in something greater than your ego, to embrace the mystery of becoming. As Jung said, the life we have not lived is the sickness from which we die. Each time you resist the change your soul yearns for, each time you choose the false security of the known over the vitality of the new, you're giving up a piece of your life, your potential, your joy. The good news is that it's never too late to change, to reclaim those lost parts of yourself, to embark on that journey of discovery and transformation. Jung worked with people of all ages and discovered that the capacity for growth and renewal accompanies us until the end of our days. In fact, he believed that the second half of life is especially dedicated to this process of rediscovery and expression of our authentic self. After fulfilling social expectations, establishing a career, perhaps starting a family, there comes a moment when the inner call becomes stronger. It's as if the soul was saying, well, you've done what was expected of you. Now, what about what you really came to do? This call can manifest as a midlife crisis, a period of depression or anxiety, or simply a persistent feeling that something is missing in your life. Jung saw it not as a problem to solve, but as an invitation to a new level of consciousness, to a more authentic way of being. The fear of change is real. It's deep. It's rooted in layers of your psyche that you may not even have known existed. But that fear doesn't define who you are or who you can become. It's simply a voice in the chorus of your being, a voice you can listen to without needing to obey. Jung taught us that true freedom doesn't consist in the absence of fear, but in the ability to act despite it, to recognize it, to give it its place but not allow it to direct your life. As he himself said, I know my fear, but despite it, I will do what I have to do. Imagine living like that, with full awareness of your fears, but not dominated by them. Able to hear that deep call of your soul and respond to it, even when it means venturing into the unknown, even when it means leaving behind the familiar and comfortable. It's not an easy path. Jung never pretended it was. In fact, he believed that the difficulty of the path is precisely what makes it valuable. As he wrote, the gold is in the dark womb of the earth, not in the sand of the stream that shines in the sun. Change invites you to immerse yourself in those depths, to explore those dark corners of your being where your most valuable treasures lie. It invites you on a journey of discovery, of integration, of transformation. A journey that, although challenging, will lead you to a fuller, more authentic, more vibrant life. Because in the end, that's what Jung discovered. That our greatest fear and our deepest desire are two sides of the same coin. We fear change because it threatens the known, the familiar, the comfortable. But we desire it because deep down, we know that on the other side of that fear lies the life we were born to live, the self we were meant to become. So the next time you feel that paralyzing fear in front of a change, remember, it's not just fear you're feeling. It's also anticipation, excitement, the call of your true self beckoning you toward a more authentic life. And in that recognition, in that integration of fear and desire, lies the key to your transformation. As Jung said, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. The change you seek is not just external, it's a profound awakening to who you really are. And that awakening, that journey home to yourself, is the greatest adventure you'll ever undertake. The question is, are you ready to begin?